Welcome to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for March 28th, 2022. City Clerk, before we do the roll call, I want to tell everybody that Councilmember Robertson has asked for what is it?
Excusal.
Excusal, not recusal, excusal from tonight's meeting. And so that's the first thing that I guess we'll vote on. Should we do roll call first though?
Either way, but I can do roll call if you would like.
Let's go ahead and just do a motion to excuse Councilmember Robertson.
I move to excuse Councilmember Robertson from this evening's meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, she is excused. Okay, go ahead, City Clerk. Let's do the roll call.
Sure. Mayor Robinson.
Here.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
As we heard, Councilmember Robertson has been excused. Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
I'm here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, could you please lead us in the flag salute?
Certainly. Just waiting for the flag. There it is. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the flag
of the United States of
United
America,
States of America,
to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one nation,
one nation,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
Thank you. So we have a proclamation tonight. It is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I'm asking Councilmember Lee if he could please read the proclamation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Whereas in Washington State, 45% of women and 22% of men report having experienced sexual violence in their lifetime. And whereas in King County, 5,059 individuals and their families receives services from the King County Sexual Assault Resource Center in 2021. And whereas rape is among the most underreported crimes for reasons that include victims' fear of being disbelieved or further traumatized. Additional barriers such as language, immigration status, gender bias, and systematic racism contribute further to the silencing of victims. And whereas negative impacts of sexual violence trauma on adults, youth, and children include fear, concern for safety, physical and mental health conditions, including symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, injury and missed work or school. And whereas King County is home to many organizations that provide culturally and linguistically specific services for survivors of sexual assault. These services are critical to effectively respond to many survivors' specific needs. And whereas only by working together as a community can we prevent and alleviate the trauma of sexual violence by ensuring supportive resources are available to all, while standing up to harmful attitudes and behaviors that contribute to sexual assault. Now, therefore, I, on behalf of Lynn Robinson, Mayor of Bellevue, Washington, and on behalf of City Council, join advocates and communities throughout King County in taking actions to prevent sexual violence by standing with survivors and proclaiming April 2022 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Together, we commit to a safer future for all children, youth, adults, and families in our community. Councilmember Conrad Lee, on behalf of Mayor Lynn Robertson.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Clerk, do we have anybody signed up for oral communications?
Yes, Thank you, Mayor. There are 9 pre-registered speakers this evening for oral communications. And the first 3 speakers have a PowerPoint presentation in combination with one another. Therefore, we will not be able to share the 3-minute timer. I will track each of the speakers 3 minutes separately and let you know when you have reached the end of your 3-minute period. So with that, I will share the presentation and call on the first speaker, which is Martha Lane. Miss Lane, can you hear me? Miss Lane, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Hello, my name is Martha Lane, and I'm here from Trees for Livability, the Bellevue-based nonprofit that is urging you to protect and expand our tree canopy. I support Trees for Livability because Bellevue has been my home since 1962. In that time, I have witnessed the loss of countless big fir, cedar, and maple trees. In fact, there are days that we hear more chainsaws than songbirds in our neighborhood. Trees for Livability came together in January 2022. A working group of volunteers researched the tree codes in other cities and came up with recommendations for improving the tree codes in Bellevue. The report is available on our website at treesforlivability.org. It contains about a dozen key concepts that I urge you to support. Tonight, we want to share a little more about the nuances of our recommendations. Next slide, please. Bellevue is attracting more businesses, more jobs, and more residents. Trees for Livability is not against this growth. Our report is focused on the residential areas of Bellevue with single-family zoning. Our report does not include recommendations for commercial areas of the city. We are focused on preserving our residential tree canopy and protecting the character of our neighborhoods, which are truly unique in the Puget Sound region. Next slide, please. Bellevue is a wonderful place to live. Many people want to move here. We need more housing, including more diverse housing options. And we are confident that increased density does not need to come at the expense of our tree canopy. Surrounding cities have successfully implemented policies to allow for growth while retaining trees. In Bellevue, developers are often removing all trees from lots, even when they are not in the way of the planned home. Many trees could have been preserved, but instead they are cut down. This practice needs to stop, and you have the power to stop it. I'd now like to turn it over to the next presenter. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Ms. Lane. The next speaker on the list is Galen Helmgren. And Mr. Helmgren, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Hello, my name is Galen Helmgren, and I'm a resident of Lake Hills. I support Trees for Livability because I love the shade trees provide. My family moved to Bellevue in 1991, and as a 6-year-old, the green belts that laced our Somerset neighborhood were otherworldly. What I learned about nature and our regional environment in school, I could observe directly from the banks of Coal Creek, surrounded by 200-year-old pine trees. When my wife and I moved to Lake Hills in 2012, it became apparent that this neighborhood of small post-war starter homes was rapidly being developed, and one of the warmest urban hotspots in the city was swiftly losing what little tree canopy remained, simply to maximize the footprint of new construction on these smaller lots. As wildfire smoke and record high summer temperatures become our new normal, preserving and enhancing existing tree canopy is the least expensive way to cool our growing city. Next slide, please. In reviewing tree codes of cities around the region, we saw a wide range of protections. At one end of the spectrum, large trees become incredibly difficult to remove, and that blocks new development. On the other end of the spectrum, some tree codes are extremely lax, are poorly enforced, or especially limited. Weak tree codes result in lots being completely cleared of most, if not all, of the trees. However, there is a middle ground, and Bellevue should seek to find a balance between development and maintaining our existing tree canopy. Our report advocates for thoughtful, intentional development that works with these goals in mind. Next slide, please. Within our own city, we have an example of tree protections that work. The Bridal Trails neighborhood has had special tree codes for over 15 years. Trees located on the perimeter of lots have more protections than trees in the center. When a tree is in the way of a proposed structure, the tree can be removed, but their tree code requires replacement trees be planted elsewhere on the lot to offset the loss. Next slide, please. Bridal Trails is heavily forested, and people who live there want to keep it that way. Other parts of our city have fantastic views that residents want to protect, and that's important too. We support neighborhood covenants that protect views. We also believe that healthy trees, which are well maintained, can complement those views. Both view protection and proper tree maintenance are details that we hope you'll consider when updating the tree codes. I would like to hand it off to our final presenter. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mr. Holmgren. The next speaker on the list is Don Marsh. Mr. Marsh, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your 3 minutes begins now.
All right. Hello, I'm Don Marsh, a resident of Somerset for the past 25 years. During the past decade, I've been involved in a number of community organizations focused on wise use of energy and smart protections for our environment. Tonight, I'm speaking as a supporter of Trees for Livability, and the connection with my past efforts will become obvious in a moment. Next slide, please. I am a co-founder of 300 Trees, a nonprofit organization that provides free trees to Bellevue residents, schools, churches, and small businesses. Last weekend, we gave away 1,000 small trees during our second annual spring tree giveaway. These will become part of Bellevue's tree canopy for future generations. But as successful as our giveaways are, planting saplings is only part of what we need to do. We must also save the large trees we already have. Next slide, please. We know that trees absorb carbon at an accelerating rate as they age. Tall, old trees are some of the planet's biggest carbon storehouses. The mature cedar, shown on the left, was recently saved from illegal removal. This tree is capturing an estimated 248 pounds of carbon each year. That is more carbon than our 1,000 saplings will absorb in the coming year. Furthermore, removing mature trees denudes the landscape, changing the feel and character of the neighborhood and making it less livable. We must preserve large trees to meet the city's tree canopy and environmental stewardship goals. Next slide, please. I'd like to conclude by highlighting important recommendations from our tree code study. First, Trees for Livability asks you to create an urban forestry commission with a range of stakeholders such as community members, builders, and arborists. Let's work together and tap into the energy of our community to create balanced regulations. Next, please act quickly to save Bellevue's largest trees while there is still time. Trees for Livability requests extra protections for landmark trees over 30 inches in diameter. These trees take multiple generations to grow and give Bellevue its character. And finally, please require paid permits for all significant or landmark tree removals. Permit fees should fund a tree canopy program year after year. It will be evergreen, pun intended. The 400 signers of our petition are ready to work with you on behalf of Bellevue's trees and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marsh. The next speaker actually the next three speakers also have a PowerPoint to share, which I will be sharing in a moment. Again, I will track your time separately and let you know when your 3 minutes have expired. So the first speaker in that group is Gauri Gupta. And Ms. Gupta, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, hold one moment while I get your PowerPoint up. Okay, your time begins now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gauri Gupta, and I live in the Crossroads area in Bellevue, Washington. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share my support for laying the foundation for funding a new Bellevue Aquatic Center and the work that Splash Forward brings for our community. So a little bit about myself. I'm a sophomore at Interlake High School, where I serve on the Bellevue Youth Council, which is a community-oriented organization in which a group of peers and I work together with the city in order to promote youth involvement and opportunities for community growth. I'm also a passionate member of the Interlake Inquirer, which is a student-led newspaper club at my school, because it allows me the opportunity to give a voice to various issues at my school and in my community. I've recently become a student ambassador and a student aquatics reporter for Splash Forward because I believe that Splash Forward's goal to bring a new public community aquatic center to Bellevue is very important to my fellow students, and I want to be a part in bringing greater awareness of this effort. There are 3 main points that I want to cover tonight regarding this topic. First, the issue my fellow students face today. These are very challenging times for each and every one of us, as we're all coping with our realities as best as we can. So much has been taken away from our social and physical activities during the pandemic that our appreciation and desire for greater opportunities to connect with fellow students, share in fun, healthy activities, and participate fully in our athletic pursuits are not being fulfilled. Today, both the swim and dive and water polo teams in Interlake High School practice outdoor year-round and compete outside the city of Bellevue at Mercer's Island Mary Wade Pool at 8 p.m., or travel to Curtis High School near Tacoma for water polo practice, which is obviously not very accessible for most students. Second, why do I believe that a new aquatic center at Bellevue Airfield Park will be a source of pride and equity for students and families? This center will provide a safe and inclusive space to connect, where everyone belongs. It will also help improve the mental health of youth through activities that foster self-improvement, skill development, and allow us to strive towards our personal goals, which is especially important for adolescents adjusting to our post-pandemic world. Furthermore, a new Bellevue Aquatic Center can be a place where the entire Bellevue School District swim and dive and water polo teams can train together, grow participation, and support one another in ways we can't imagine today. Third and lastly, what I want to do to support Splash Forward's efforts. I'll work hard to create a support base for this project by bringing awareness within clubs, classrooms, and through school events. As an aquatics reporter for Splash Forward, I want to share how having access to a world-class aquatic center would change the lives for students and families for generations to come. Personally, I still haven't learned to swim yet, and it can be challenging in this day and age where it seems like kids everywhere are swimming in water parks, beaches, pools, etc. And it definitely makes me feel left out that I'm unable to participate in these social endeavors. My dad and I recently tried to schedule some one-on-one swimming lessons at Samina Swim Center. However, nothing was available, and it wasn't as affordable as we would have liked.
Ms.
However,
pardon me, your 3 minutes has expired.
Okay.
I will call on the next speaker, who is Bob Peters. And Mr. Peters, can you hear me? Mr. Peters, can you hear me? Mr. Peters, are you there? Okay, I am going to call the next speaker, which is Susan Papalardo. Ms. Papalardo, can you hear me? Ms. Papalardo, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to go forward now?
Yes, I know Bob is on and I don't know what the audio problem is, but yes.
Not sure. Okay, I will go to the next slide.
Okay,
Time begins now.
okay. Can you go to the next slide, please? Great. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. My name is Susan Papalardo. I live in Washington, Kirkland, Washington. I'm the co-founder and president of Splash Forward. Thank you for this opportunity to share my comments as you consider authorizing the Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Bellevue and Splash Forward. This MOU formalizes our working relationship that we have built together since 2017. The MOU outlines our nonprofit's role as the private fundraising partner to realize a new game-changing public aquatic center serving the people of Bellevue and our surrounding communities. We are committed to laying the foundation for a successful fundraising campaign. We will begin by executing a private fundraising feasibility study and work with the city to develop a marketing and fundraising plan that supports both private and public sources. We will also partner with the city to fully explore potential project and programming partners. We are in our pre-planning fundraising phase and actively interviewing fundraising consultants so that we can accurately assess the full range of private funding sources from local corporate partners, local businesses, philanthropic sources such as foundations and grants, and individual donors. Next slide, please. We will build on the existing relationships we have formed and invest in new ones. Today, I sent you additional letters of support we have received since we last met. Next slide, please. Special Olympics of Washington, Rainier Athletes, Orca Swim School, teaching adults to swim, and the Husky Swim Foundation. Next slide, please. I want to thank the council for their ongoing support, vision for Bellevue, openness to think big, and keen focus to ask the right questions. I want to thank the Parks Board for their support and community perspective that seeks to maintain and build upon the health and wellness opportunities and spaces in Bellevue. I owe a tremendous thank you to our Parks and Community Services staff, especially Parks Director Michael Shiosaki, Pam Furman, and Ken Kroger, for their ongoing partnership, support, openness, guidance, and healthy rapport. We look forward to continuing to build on our relationships, maintain our transparency, explore options, and confidently take the next steps together. We believe investing in facilities that create safe, inclusive spaces to connect, recreate, celebrate our diversity, improve our health, and cultivate our hopes and dreams is an investment in the people they serve and will have ripple effects throughout the community for generations to come. These investments create social infrastructure for our communities and complement the major investments being made in Bellevue. Our efforts will restore access to aquatics for those who do not have access today and will address the long wait list, currently well over 1,000 for swim lessons, so our community will be safer in, on, and around our Pacific Northwest waters. The update process to Airfield Parks Master Plan commences this summer and will give the community an opportunity to add their voices. Together, we will help Bellevue continue to be the city where you want to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Papalardo. I will call on Mr. Peters again to see if we have your audio now. Mr. Peters, can you hear me? Okay, it does not appear that we have Mr. Peters, so I will move on to the next speaker, and that is AJ Joshi. Miss Joshi, if you're connected with a phone or under a different name, can you use the raised hand function so I can locate you? Oh, Mr. Peters, I see your hand. You want to try one more time? Okay, Miss Joshi, are you connected to this meeting? Okay, I will move to the next speaker on the list, which is Michelle Wanamaker. Ms. Wanamaker, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you. Mayor Robinson and council members, thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Michelle Wanamaker. I live in Eastgate and my address is on file. I'd like to thank staff for recognizing the problems with cut-through traffic in Eastgate and attempting to do something about it. But while this proposal in Ordinance 6656 may decrease cut-through traffic on 136th Avenue Southeast and near Tyee Middle School, it will not decrease cut-through traffic in the neighborhood. This is because 2 of the 3 worst streets for cut-through traffic are exempted from the speed limit decrease due to potential impacts on transit. Currently, southbound cut-through traffic from Southeast 36th Street to Allen Road and eventually working their way up to Newport Way is divided between 136th Avenue Southeast and 146th Avenue Southeast. By excluding 146th Avenue and also Allen Road from the speed limit decrease, this will just move all southbound cut-through traffic to 146th Avenue, a street which has no sidewalks, and in places there are mature shrubs which go clear to the curb. Plus, there are vehicles parked on the street in some places. This forces pedestrians to sometimes have to walk in the street as there is no other way to pass these obstacles. And adding all the additional cut-through traffic from 136th Avenue to 146th Avenue under these conditions, especially during the winter months, when people are walking home from the park and ride and bus stops in the dark, is a recipe for tragedy. So I have an alternate proposal for 146th Avenue and for Allen Road. You know how when you're going eastbound on I-90 and you pass Issaquah and the speed limit increases to 70 miles per hour? There's a sign below it which states trucks remain at 60 miles per hour. Could we do something similar on 146th Avenue and on Allen Road? Could we put signs on 146th Avenue decreasing the speed limit to 20 miles per hour, but transit remains at 25 miles per hour? And could we do the same on Allen Road? This would have the potential of decreasing cut-through traffic in the neighborhood. The current proposal will not. I'll be interested to hear staff's response to this alternate proposal. Thank you for your time. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Wanamaker. And I understand from Mr. Peters that he has solved the audio issue, so I will call Mr. Peters at this time. Can you hear me, Mr. Peters?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Bob Peters and I live in Seattle. I'd like to thank the council for the opportunity to share my support for the MOU between the city of Bellevue and Splash Forward regarding the Aquatic Center investment being explored at the Bellevue Airfield Park. By way of background, I retired from a 36-year banking career in 2021, having led Bank of America and Washington Federal Bank's commercial banking businesses, where I delivered billions of dollars of capital statewide to public and private entities. I earned my undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Washington and was 2-year swimming scholarship at the UW. My first job was teaching 2 to 3-year-olds basic swimming skills, and I coached competitive swimming at the Bellevue YMCA during my college years. It was also an honor to serve 3 years on the Bellevue Downtown Association Board and 6 years on the Seattle Chamber Board Executive Committee. There are 3 points I would like to briefly cover. First, great cities create best-in-class living conditions for their citizens. The new Bellevue Aquatic Center project is a unique opportunity for Bellevue to invest in world-class community infrastructure. The post-pandemic, more flexible workforce has upped the stakes as employees are no longer geographically tethered to the degree of the past. It will be imperative for cities to invest in long-term community assets. Second, this investment will meaningfully reverse our region's underinvestment in publicly accessible aquatics facilities. I vividly remember the lost opportunity to build a world-class aquatics complex at the University of Washington in support of the 1990 Goodwill Games. Soon thereafter, the university canceled the men's and women's swimming programs. Constructing a new world-class aquatic facility in Bellevue will, in my opinion, continue to build upon the positive momentum that the Eastside communities have enjoyed over the past 30 years. It will improve the physical and mental well-being of its citizens and enhance the long-term vibrancy of Bellevue. Bountiful regional fresh and saltwater recreation options need to be supported with a facility so that our citizens can learn basic swim and water safety skills. With well over 40% of Bellevue's population foreign-born, this is especially important since many of our citizens may not have had access to these essential skills to safely enjoy our water-based opportunities. Third, Splash Forward plays a vital advocacy and partnership role between public and private sectors. I believe that Splash Forward's thoughtful approach to build broad community awareness has positioned it well to secure private funds through corporations, foundations, grants, and individual donors. The success of future capital investments and programming partnerships will be well served by Splash Forward. Thank you for the opportunity to share my perspective on this very exciting community investment.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. And the final speaker on our pre-registered list is Rita Maher. And Ms. Maher, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. It's Rita Meher.
Okay, thank you. Your time begins now.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Rita Meher. I'm the co-founder and the executive director of Tasveer. Tasveer means picture in Hindi and Urdu, and we have been a local arts and culture fixture in the Pacific Northwest for last 20 years. Yes, we just celebrated our 20 years celebration last weekend, and I would like to give a big thanks to the City of Bellevue's Cultural and Economic Development team and Laurie Hoffman for taking part in our special celebration with actor and comedian Carl Penn. So thank you to City of Bellevue. Tasveer runs the largest South Asian film festival in North America. Our mission is to inspire social change through films, art, and storytelling. Our programs take place all over the greater Seattle and Bellevue area and other neighboring cities. However, we consider Bellevue as our base. Our last physical office was in Bellevue before we shut down due to the pandemic. And we are again looking for a home in Bellevue. So we are very proud to partner with the City of Bellevue for many, many years. Today, I'm here to speak a little bit about Bellevue's support for simplifying funding process for small and BIPOC-led arts organizations. Truth to be told, for small and BIPOC-led arts organization, access to funding has always been sparse or piecemeal. Tasveer has for 20 years now made our festivals and programs happen through sheer determination, lots of volunteer hours, and the support of local governments, foundations, and sponsors. We have worked very hard to bring arts education, anti-racism, equity, social justice, and creativity to the City of Bellevue. And with trust and support from the city, we and our fellow nonprofits can put more energy into doing the work on the ground. Like many other small to mid-sized organizations in Bellevue like ours, led by and serving otherwise underserved communities, we will benefit from good faith efforts by the city to fund the arts generously with more simplified application to provide general operating support, to fund multi-year awards that take away some of the administrative burden and fuel the creative and socially necessary work happening. We have proven that when the city invests in our efforts, we will turn around to produce jobs, make Bellevue a welcoming and culturally vibrant place for diverse residents, immigrants, and the next generation, and work with other arts organizations to create a strong social fabric. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Meher. That is the end of our pre-registered list.
Charmaine, before you ask for other speakers, can you please ask that last speaker to send her talking points to the City Council?
Yes, Ms. Meher, I will follow up with you via email and give you the council's email address for to send your speaking points. Okay, and so at this point I would do a call out. We have a couple of additional minutes of oral communications. If there's anyone connected to this call who would like to make communication to the council, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. I will say that we have had, pursuant to council rules, we only allow 3 speakers on any one side of any particular topic. We have reached a maximum of 3 on Trees for Livability and also on the Splash Forward MOU. So on any other topic, please raise your hand. Okay, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands. That closes oral communications.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the report from our city manager, Mr. Miyake.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I have a number of items to report under the city manager's report. The first one is about the Kelsey Creek Farm annual sheep shearing event this year. Joining us this evening are Shelley Bringham, the assistant director, as well as Anna Marie Solomonson, community services supervisor, both of the Parks and Community Services Department, to say a few words about this wonderful event. Shelley?
Thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and council members. With me tonight is Anna Marie Solomonson, Community Services Supervisor for Kelsey Creek Farm.
Shearing returns as an in-person event. Due to the pandemic, it was canceled in 2020. In 2021, it became a virtual event, and we're excited to return live this year. We welcome the community in person again to see the sheep get their haircut. Free shuttle services for the event are available for visitors to catch the ride from Bannerwood Park and Wilburton Park and Ride. Visitors can also park at the International School and the surrounding neighborhood and walk into Kelsey Creek Farm Park. Accessible parking will be available in the main parking lot. Admission for the event is free.
This unique and beloved community event draws a diverse crowd of visitors of all ages and is especially popular to families with children. Attendance typically ranges from 4,000 to 5,000 people. The event includes a variety of demonstrations and activities, with the main demonstration being shearing the sheep. Other demonstrators include the Northwest Regional Spinners, sharing their spinning and weaving techniques, and the Eastside Heritage Center hosting activities at the Fraser Log Cabin.
The event will also have visual and hands-on activities, including animal viewing, Green Apple Alpaca Farm, pony rides, a children's wool felting station, and a small electric train display for families to watch and learn about the historic Wilburton Trestle. Northwest Vintage Irons will be giving wagon rides pulled by antique tractors. Children's activity area will have pedal tractors, crafts, a straw play area, and more. A food truck, a coffee wagon, and kettle corn will also be available. Fees vary depending upon the activity. Sheep shearing has taken place since 1972, when Kelsey Creek Farm was brought farm animals on the site. Shearing is necessary for the health and care requirements of animals that grow wool. Wool never stops growing, and if it's too much and accumulates, the sheep will get too hot in the summer times. In the 1970s, the farm staff used to schedule the shearing of the sheep, and the neighborhood and walkers would just come over and watch. This informal gathering became so popular, staff created an event in 1994 called the Wild and Woolly Sheep Shearing. Farming is universal, and many countries raise sheep for wool, to spin and weave, with many beautiful pieces of clothing are made. As visitors watch the sheep shearing, staff can explain why do sheep need to have their wool removed, how much wool can be removed on a sheep, and that's anywhere from 6 to 15 pounds, how the shearer works with the sheep to keep their stress level down and helps them to relax. At the very end, the fleece is gathered up into one piece, then taken over to the skirting table, and that's where the wool that is not of good condition will be removed.
2022 marks 2 additional milestones for Kelsey Creek Community Park. This year marks its 50th year of being a City of Bellevue public park. Kelsey Creek Community Park features 150 acres of forest, meadows, and wetlands in the heart of Bellevue, offering a glimpse of this city's past. 2022 also marks the 100th year founding of the Twin Valley Dairy on the site. 2 historic barns sit prominently on the crest of a hill at Kelsey Creek Community Park. These barns are listed in the Washington Heritage Barn Register and were once home to the Twin Valley Dairy. These 2 milestones will be recognized throughout the year at Kelsey Creek Farm programs and events. Thank you for the opportunity to share this upcoming special event, returning in person. We hope to see council members and the community at the Kelsey Creek Sheep Sharing on April 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley and Anna Marie. Mayor and council members, I have 2 items I'd like to just comment on that are on your consent calendar this evening. The first one is item 8C, which is ordinance 6656, amending the code to establish a speed limit of 20 miles per hour on most local streets near Tyee Middle School in the Eastgate neighborhood. This is the 3rd such ordinance for speed limit reduction from 25 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour. And these reductions are part of the Neighborhood Slow Zone program. This program is also part of our Vision Zero action plan element that is working to assess a citywide local street speed limit reduction. Council will have the opportunity to hear more about this action plan element and others during a Vision Zero update, which is scheduled around in mid-April of this year. The other item is item 8E, which is resolution 10081, authorizing an MOU with Splash Forward, which you heard about quite a bit about this evening under oral communications. This formalizes a working relationship to support the fundraising for and development of a new Bellevue Aquatic Center. And as council knows, Splash Forward is an organized group of residents who desire to have a new aquatics facility in Bellevue. And for years, city staff have been actively working in collaboration with Splash Forward. And at the October 18th, 2021 council meeting, council gave direction to develop an MOU to work with Splash Forward to support fundraising efforts for a regional aquatic center. The MOU in the packet fulfills the council's direction to that end. Aquatics is currently on the work plan for the Parks and Community Services Board, and Splash Forward continues to be a partner as the process moves forward. Just some background information on those 2 consent topics, Mayor and council members, before you vote on approving them. And that concludes my manager's report for this evening, Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, we have some study session items. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce them?
Mayor, I believe we have some appointments to commissions first.
Okay, maybe I skipped a page. Sorry. Page 3. All right, here we go. Indeed, we do have some appointments and reappointments. First, we have a council appointment recommendation for appointment to the Human Services Commission. And Deputy Mayor, this is your commission. Would you like to introduce that and make a motion?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I'm pleased to recommend Jaskaran Singh Saro, better known as Jimmy in the community, for appointment to the Human Services Commission this evening after an extensive recruitment and interview process. Jimmy is a longtime resident of Bellevue, a 2017 Bellevue Essentials graduate with a track record of giving back to his community. He's also the president of the Norwood Village Association, longtime director of the Service of Core Humanity, which has been feeding the homeless at CFH and other shelters since 2014. And he also established COVID-19 testing at his Sikh temple when the pandemic hit our area. Due to his commitment to our community, he has a strong understanding of the most pressing human services needs facing our city right now, and is keenly aware of how language barriers and a lack of cultural competency can be a challenge for residents seeking to access resources in our community. So with that, I will go ahead and make the motion that I move to appoint Jaskaran Singh Saro to the Human Services Commission to serve a partial term expiring on May 31st, 2025.
Does anybody want a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Welcome, Jimmy. Okay, next we have some reappointments, and I know Councilmember Stokes, Councilmember Lee, and Deputy Mayor all have reappointments they want to make. So we'll start with Councilmember Stokes to introduce yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mayor. I'm very pleased to recommend reappointment of Judy Gowdy to the Arts Commission. Judy has served a shorter term, came in for a replacement, and has just done an outstanding job. She's very skilled and very steeped in arts and the history of arts in Bellevue. And I'm just pleased that she wants to continue for the next term. So I recommend her very highly. On the Parks and Community Services Board, Paul Clark has served one term, and I've had the opportunity since I've been with the Arts Commission for some time, and I know about Judy, but just been this year with the Parks and Community Services, but I've had the opportunity to be with him on meetings, 3 meetings so far. And I was very impressed by his knowledge and his relationships with the board. And I think he's a very strong, committed individual, and a great access for the community and the Parks Board. So I recommend his reappointment for another 4-year term.
Let's go ahead, Councilmember Stokes, and have you make the motion, 2 motions, one first for the Arts Commission, the second for the Parks Board, and we'll just vote those in.
Okay, well, I move to reappoint Judy Gowdy to the Arts Commission for a full 4-year term.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. And then let's go ahead with the Parks Board recommendation.
Okay, I recommend appointment of Paul Clark to the Parks and Community Services Board for a full term, on a 4-year term for the Parks Commission.
Second.
Board.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Okay, Councilmember Lee, you have a reappointment. Could you please introduce?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to speak on each and then make a motion for each. Okay, thank you. I'd like to discuss the position of the Environmental Services Commission. It's my pleasure to recommend the appointment of Kenneth Wang, and he was appointed to fill a term a couple of years ago, and he has demonstrated extreme interest, competence, and participation, and working with the commission and the commission chair. We believe that he will continue to serve the commission and the community of Bellevue and the city council well. So he's still very interested and engaged, and I recommend oppose the motion to recommend Mr. Kenneth Wang to serve another term, a full term, on the Environmental Services Commission. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And further, I'm pleased to recommend the reappointment of Sarah Rock to the Library Board. She was also appointed not too long ago, recently, to fill a term, and now she has opportunity to serve a full term, also ending May 31st, 2026. And again, in consultation with the board chair and also the representative King County Library system. And we felt that Ms. Rock would be very committed and be a great addition to the board. As a result, I move the recommendation to have Sarah Rock to be appointed to Library Board for a full term.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, is that it for you, Councilmember Lee?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, then that we have Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, you have a reappointment to make.
Correct. Thank you, Mayor. So two members of the Human Services Commission, both Benjamin Piper, the current chair of the commission, and Angela Fan, who was recently appointed to the Human Services Commission and is just filling out that partial term. Both have been outstanding and great members of the commission, and I'm certain will continue to contribute in real thoughtful and meaningful ways. So with that, I move to reappoint Benjamin Piper and Angela Fan to another term expiring on May 31st, 2026.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. It is just remarkable the commitment that the community makes in serving on these boards and commissions. So thank you for these recommendations, and I'm happy to move on to the consent calendar. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, now it's time for our study session items. So Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce the first one?
Sure, Mayor. Mayor and council members, you have 3 items on your study session agenda this evening. And the first one is on a proposed code amendment regarding noise. And just by way of background, the current noise code prohibits the use of amplified sound after 5 p.m. Monday to Saturday and all day Sunday and holidays. This topic was last in front of council at the February 28 meeting earlier this year. And at that meeting, council directed staff to initiate work on the noise code. The proposed code in front of you this evening would update the noise permit decision criteria to expand allowable hours and days for sound amplification use while maintaining other requirements. After the staff presentation, staff is seeking council direction to prepare an ordinance for final action at a future council meeting. Joining us this evening is our Nick Whipple, our planning manager, as well as Christina Gallant, senior planner, both from the Development Services Department. With that, I'll turn it over to the staff.
Great, thank you, City Manager Miyake, and good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and City Council. As City Manager Miyake said, my name is Nick Whipple. I'm the Code and Policy Planning Manager, and joining me this evening is Christina Gallant, the Senior Planner on the Code and Policy Division. So we are returning this evening with a Bellevue City Code Amendment to expand the days and hours that the city may consider and approve the use of amplified sound. And this is also part of the 2022-2023 Loopy work plan that was presented at last Monday's council meeting. The 2 amendments to the noise code that we'll discuss tonight are based on an analysis of current barriers and challenges to small scale events in the city's neighborhoods and after-work related events that would like to use amplified sound as a component of their event. So this need is particularly relevant for upcoming spring and summer events like neighborhood block parties on Sundays and after work activations in the downtown along the Grand Connection route. Next slide, please. So tonight we will be asking the council for direction to have staff prepare the Bellevue City Code ordinance to expand the number of days and hours for amplified sound for final action at a future meeting. And if directed, we can plan to bring this ordinance for adoption on the consent calendar. Next slide, please. So for tonight's agenda, we'll begin by providing a brief background about the purpose of the noise control code and the different noise levels that are permitted throughout the city. We'll also discuss the threshold for needing a permit to allow for sound amplification. And we'll talk about the specific and narrow amendments that are being addressed by this Bellevue City Code Amendment, and then give an overview of the public engagement that has been conducted for this effort, and then end our presentation with some follow-up from the council discussion in February when this amendment was initiated, before asking for a final direction from council. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Christina. Christina?
Thanks, Nick. As noted, we're going to start tonight with a bit of context on the noise control chapter. And how it functions to help queue up these amendments. So overall, the purpose is to minimize harmful noise exposure of all kinds. And within our code, we do have established some maximum environmental noise levels. These come from state regulations for environmental noise. And because the code is set up to be concerned with noise impacts, these levels are measured at the site that is receiving the sound, not at the source of the sound. So the limits depend on the land use type. Currently in residential districts, there's an upper limit of 55 to 60 decibels on receiving properties, and that goes up to 60 to 70 decibels in industrial districts. For comparison, 60 decibels is roughly similar to conversational volume, while 70 is more similar to a car or a vacuum. And so within the noise control code, we have some specific provisions regulating sound amplification. And in general, a noise permit for sound amplification is necessary when the amplification is clearly audible across a real property boundary or at least 75 feet from the source. In addition, once a noise permit is obtained, an additional 10 decibels above the current limits is available for permittees during the approved period of sound amplification. So as noted, because our noise code is concerned with noise impacts, that permit is only regulating the specific noise impacts of that sound amplification, not the event itself. Where this can get somewhat confusing is that we do have a separate path for using amplified sound at certain large events. This is because these large special events are reviewed holistically for impacts to other public rights of way, public resources. And so amplified sound is considered within that broader picture. But otherwise, the noise permit is just about the noise impacts, not the event. And so in order to be approved for a noise permit, we have some established criteria. First, that there is no amplification permitted on Sundays or holidays. Next, that the amplification is only permitted 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Saturday. It can't take place at a given location more than 4 days in a week. Again, subject to those decibel limits we noted, subject to our existing quiet zone prohibitions and protections for schools and hospitals. And so, as Nick mentioned during the economic development outreach process, these first two criteria were identifying as being particularly challenging for many of the types of events or use cases for sound amplification. So looking at that date limitation and hour limitation. Which brings us to the amendments we're proposing tonight. They are targeted, but we anticipate they could have a really positive benefit. So first would be to remove the ban on amplification on Sundays and holidays. And then second would be amending the time limit. So currently, the time limit for amplification is 8 to 5, Monday through Saturday. We propose updating that time limit to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Sunday through Thursday, so weekday nights. And then Friday through Saturday, updating to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. So as mentioned previously, the genesis for this project really came from engagement under the Economic Development Plan update. However, we've also employed additional engagement specific to this amendment process. We did share a broad notification of the proposed amendments in the Neighborhood News and the Cultural and Economic Development newsletter. In addition, we did direct engagement via email to representative residents, event representatives, cultural organizations, and the business community. We also have an online presence on the city webpage, a dedicated page for the amendment process. And so far, all of the comments we've received have been supportive. And so at our council initiation, we had a number of kind of comments and questions of related issues to the noise code that we wanted to follow up on, things that we can't really address through the code itself, but which staff have identified opportunities to help advance through other means. So in general, we saw some opportunities to look at streamlining information about the different permit pathways, clarifying when a different permit or process may be required depending on the type of event, looking at ways to improve the permit clarity, and also developing some improved supporting guidance on our website, like FAQ documents or other guides. And already we have added some language and a link to the sound permit application page to help guide those who may be considering a larger special event to point them to the right resources to get that approval process kicked off. The Economic Development Department is also working with Parks on supporting developing a special event guide to help provide some additional information there. So with that, that brings us to the end. Again, the direction we're seeking tonight is to prepare the BCCA ordinance to expand days and hours for amplified sound for final action at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We've all seen this before. Oh my gosh. Oh, we're still here. Okay, I just lost you all for a moment. So if anybody has any comments or questions, please raise your hand. I see Councilmember Barksdale followed by Councilmember Zahn. Go ahead, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Nick and Christina, for the update. Look forward to the nightlife that will result from this. Quick question, does this still, removing the ban, does this still require authorization from Development Services to for the amplified sound, or is it just outright permitted now after we take action?
So Councilmember Barksdale, we are not proposing to remove the permit requirement for the use of amplified sound. So there would still be a permit application needed for this authorization.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I had two questions, or one comment, one question. I like having a special events guide so that it's easier for people to understand how to leverage our process, and then having that in multiple languages as well, so that those where English is not their native language can also understand. And then my question is this. I like the fact that on the weekends, the amplified sound goes to 10 p.m. My question was about Sunday morning. So it looks like the Saturday to Sunday is the same 8 a.m. Are we anticipating a lot of usage of this at 8 a.m. versus 9 in the morning on Sunday? And I only ask that because sometimes we do see that Sundays are a little bit later in the morning. So can you just help me understand why the 8 a.m. was chosen on Sunday?
Sure, council members, and we'll have Christina actually provide some explanation there about the hours.
Sure. Well, this amendment process was mainly focused on most of the feedback we heard was about the end period. So, you know, we simply, I think, didn't hear a whole lot of complaints about the start time, but that is a good question. We don't have a good idea of whether events might be looking to start at 8 a.m. on Sundays. But yeah, it's a question.
Okay, well, I just wanted to understand because sometimes we do get, you know, just in terms of construction noise, we definitely get emails saying that, boy, the noise is sounding really early on a Sunday morning. And so whether that's a concern in this particular ordinance or not. And that's what prompted the question about whether adding Sunday, is it from 8 to 10, or whether it should be a little bit later on Sunday morning, like 9 o'clock.
Sure. Yeah, Sundays in the proposal, it's 8 to 8. But one thing to note too is that this is only for sound amplification. So it wouldn't change the construction noise considerations.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, Deputy Mayor, would you like to make a motion?
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to prepare legislation for future action on a consent agenda, amending Chapter 9.18 of the Bellevue City Code to expand days and hours for amplified sound.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you. All right, Mr. Miyake, what's up next?
The second item is related to the arts grants guidelines. Just by way of background, the City Council sets the overall guidelines for grants and approves annual awards. And the last major change to the guidelines was made back in 2018. And, based on some recent community feedback, the staff and Arts Commission believe it's time to update the current guidelines to better support the arts community and to be consistent with the city's adopted economic development plan and the council's vision and priorities. This evening, after the staff presentation, staff are seeking council direction to initiate work on updating the guidelines. Joining us this evening are Jesse Canedo, Assistant Director from Economic Development, and Lori Hoffman, Arts Community Manager, both from the Community Development Department. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the staff.
Thank you, City Manager Miyake. While Lori gets the presentation geared up, Council, this is an update to, or request to update our guidelines around the annual arts grants to help improve the outcomes and lower barriers for some of our diverse nonprofit organizations that are looking to receive grants from the city on an annual basis. As the City Manager mentioned, we've been taking a continuous improvement lens on this work and doing a lot of work with our community stakeholders to understand what barriers exist to their applying for grants. So with that, I will hand it over to Lori.
Thank you so much, Jesse. Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members for having me here tonight. Tonight, staff is seeking council direction to initiate work on updates to the arts grants guidelines, as you've heard. This work will better support our arts and culture nonprofits and creatives who are making Bellevue a more vibrant community, consistent with the Economic Development Plan and Bellevue City Council 21-23 vision priorities. Staff will return with recommended improvements at a future meeting. Our agenda tonight will include a brief review of the arts grants background and value and social impact. We'll then look at staff analysis and proposed guiding principles for changes. We will end the presentation with a look at the timeline and next steps. The city has provided community arts and culture grants in this form since the early 2000s, with the latest major changes made in 2018. Currently, the grants fund arts and culture organizations through 3 annual granting programs: the Eastside Arts Partnership, Special Projects, and Power Up program. Day-to-day administration of these programs is handled by arts program staff. The Arts Commission evaluates applications and makes funding recommendations to council, and City Council sets the overall guidelines for the grants and approves the annual awards. In 2022, we are funding 42 organizations and individuals and have awarded 45 grants in total through our 3 granting programs. The Eastside Arts Partnership contains 2 levels of grants, Community and Pro, with awards up to $5,000 and $10,000 respectively. EAP grants provide operational support to nonprofits that provide art, culture, and heritage programs in Bellevue. The Power Up grant helps organizations develop capacity and build their helps organizations with their development and capacity building, and is for folks who have already received an Eastside Arts Partnership. This grant is one time up to $5,000. And then our special project grants foster creativity and innovation by artists and communities that fulfill cultural gaps and inspire new forms of creative participation, with awards around $1,000 apiece. The city's arts grants have an important impact on the community's access to creative outlets, arts education, and the attraction of regional visitors to Bellevue. Additionally, the grants are important as they allow the limited art staff to have an outsized impact by bringing an estimated total of nearly 3,500 artists and over 4,800 volunteers to contribute their creative talents to Bellevue every year. In 2022, artists and art groups funded by the city will serve an estimated 1.1 million residents and visitors through programs, performances, cultural events, and arts education. They will ensure over 188,000 people have access to these opportunities through free and reduced admission, and they will provide 16,900 people with scholarships to participate in arts education programs. Overall, grantees will offer programs designed to increase arts and culture access to our diverse community, including people with disabilities, youth and seniors, and historically underserved populations, all while supporting higher levels of creative civic engagement. It is clear that our community's money is well spent in the hands of these organizations, and the Arts Grants program improves our civic life. Beyond the specific quantifiable number of people served by these grants, there are also broader qualitative benefits. Arts grants support organizations and activities best suited to heal our community from the social emotional damage of the COVID-19 pandemic and move our community forward as we strive to overcome systematic racism. Data shows that our arts and culture organizations are uniquely equipped to foster positive community and health outcomes. Some examples include a 50% increase in community activities. A study out of the Philadelphia region shows that cultural participation leads to wider community participation. Participants most involved in cultural activities were 50% more likely to be involved in other non-arts community activities. 40% more likely to have diverse friends. 12th graders who participated in the arts are 40% more likely to have friends from different racial groups and are 29% less likely to feel that it is okay to make a racist comment, proving that participation in the arts activities benefits social cohesion. Arts improve social skills by 25 to 39%. A 2015 study showed that youth participating in arts programs showed significant improvement in social and emotional learning skills like conflict resolution, future orientation, critical response, and career readiness. Youth participants measured 25 to 39% higher on these key skills after completing the arts program. And arts encourage empathy and decrease distrust of others. A 2013 study showed that exposure to stories of other cultural experiences, such as through literary fiction, significantly increase empathy and the ability to see another person's point of view. After reviewing feedback from our grantees over the last 4 years and conversations with the city's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Division, staff recommends these proposed guiding principles for updates. These guiding principles are recommendations, and staff welcomes council's feedback tonight. Proposed guiding principles include making sure our grant program reflects the current needs of our arts and culture community. The 2018 grant guideline update introduced several innovative approaches to support and build capacity within the creative community. The need to update them further is informed by feedback we've received since then. Staff is speaking with the Arts Commission, our DEI office, our legal counsel, and arts grantees to help inform possible updates in alignment with current policy and vision. Ensure equitable access by simplifying the application process. In 2022, awards ranged from $500 to $7,700. However, the time needed to complete the application according to current guidelines can be substantial. That is time put in before even starting the substantive work of the project being proposed. This heavy workload unduly burdens smaller and newer arts and culture organizations who most often do not have dedicated grant writing staff. Who commonly rely on community volunteers to complete the application. To say it plainly, we're asking for a lot of work for what can be relatively little financial support, possibly discouraging the very organizations we'd like to see apply. Center underserved communities and funding priorities. Staff has identified opportunities to remove barriers and provide additional positive impact for Bellevue's diverse communities. For example, in the current Eastside Arts Partnership model, we limit the amount of funding that can be requested based on annual budget size and consider organizations in two pools: pro partners, who have annual budgets over $200,000 a year, and community partners who have annual budgets under $200,000 a year. Pro partners can apply up to $10,000 in funding, while our community partners are limited to $5,000 and or not to exceed 50% of the proposed annual budget. Looking at our program through an equity lens, this dual system gives a built-in advantage to organizations who have historically had access to capital and further disadvantages new and under-resourced organizations. Activate the Bel-Red Arts District through arts grants initiatives or incentives. As work the Arts District starts to ramp up in the next few years, this revision of the arts grant guidelines is an excellent opportunity to align multiple priorities. By offering additional competitive funds for projects willing to start in the Bel-Red area, we can both fund new works for our community and activate our arts district while we do it. And finally, explore multi-year support to streamline and reduce work. For 2022, the available grant budget of $145,000 was only able to meet 53% of the community's requests. The average grant award has continued to shrink from $5,600 in 2018 to $3,100 in 2022, as the Arts Commission has strived to meet the needs of as many applicants as possible in a growing pool of applicants. Streamlining and exploring multi-year awards are both ways to reduce the burden of applicant work for what are relatively small grants. Next steps, staff will incorporate the feedback we hear tonight, along with feedback from the Arts Commission, previous grant applicants, member of the arts and culture community, DEI, and legal staff. And we will make sure that we are meeting our goals to provide an equitable and inclusive grant program and application while ensuring we meet our legal requirements in granting public funds. For review, the timeline of this work is relatively tight as we try to thread the needle between the annual application windows. Information and data gathering began in earnest in January and February, and has continued strongly throughout March. The Arts Commission was briefed on March 8th. I'm honored to be here tonight to brief with council. Staff will return to the Arts Commission in April for a recommendation and then bring that final recommendation to council in May for approval. This is all to best prepare our cultural community for any changes. Staff will plan to host information sessions in July ahead of the grants opening in August. All right. Tonight we are asking for you to direct staff to initiate work on updates to the arts grants guidelines and return with recommended improvements at a future meeting. Thank you so much for your time tonight. I welcome any questions or feedback.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. So any comments or questions? I'm going to start with Councilmember Stokes, and then we will go on to Deputy Mayor, Councilmember Barksdale, Councilmember Lee, and Councilmember Zahn, and then myself. So go ahead, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mayor. This has been a very interactive effort to look at where we're going in the arts, and so much is changing. And I think that's the thing that struck us, that we're having so many different groups. We've been successful in increasing the interest and participation. And with the diversity and continuing diversity, it introduces other things to it. So we're looking at it from a different lens. And I think the commission and staff have just done a great job in going out with the community and looking at where we're going. Frankly, when I look at this, we're talking about a small amount of money for a whole lot of things that we expect from that, and great things that, this is a creative economy, and it's something that really is important to us. And it also does a great job of looking at our priorities and our commitment to equity and to inclusion, and to getting the whole community working together. And I think it's already having the focus and working with this over the last couple of years and trying to do it on, trying to balance things, I think has really increased the respect for the Arts Commission and for the arts program, and increased a lot of interest for it. And so they've set a good tone for this. So I would encourage that we approve this tonight and work on this, and come back, and we will, communicate quite often and how it's going and the impact it has and all. But again, it's a really good step forward in a lot of our policy, a lot of our hopes for arts and community, and it will help us do a better job of particularly getting newer organizations involved and expanding as we expand as we work on the Bellevue, the Bel-Red Arts District, as we work in the rest of the city. As all this is changing and growing, this is a good time to update this, and I would highly recommend that we council passes this tonight. And thanks very much, Lori and staff.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the ask that we're going to be doing tonight is to ask staff to initiate work on the updates, not to pass it, but I like your enthusiasm and I appreciate it. Next up, we have Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, great presentation. Thank you so much, Lori. And I really appreciate highlighting how the arts is so important to our community and all the different ways it does. In fact, I'd love to get a copy of that. Was it 2015 report that you walked through about all the just incredible ways that the arts can improve, change, open people's eyes to different things, new experiences. It's just, it's incredible. And I don't think those things are said enough, quite frankly, what the arts can do in our community. So thank you for walking through that, and just great program. As Councilmember Stokes mentioned, I'm ready to move this along as well too, to initiate that work. Just one question that I had was on and I think the proposed guiding principles on point, no question, those are great. I'm just curious on when you're starting this work, some type of look back process to ensure that we are hitting those guidelines that you mentioned there. Either after a year, 6 months, or after that first grant process, or wherever the commission or yourself feel is a good place to stop, look back, and make sure that we're actually fulfilling those guideline principles that you've outlined and proposed tonight. So happy to have an answer on that tonight or when you come back. But have you had any thought on that yet?
Our feedback process with our grantees is actually fairly fluid and ongoing. Having a more formalized feedback session or look back is a great idea. We can incorporate that into our recommendations. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And I also appreciate the way that you've laid out the outcomes and the references, by the way. I did take note. I appreciated those. I was going to actually, in talking about the guiding principles, is there a way to carry the outcomes into the principles? So for example, one of the things that can help with improving social skills and encouraging empathy is having more interactive art, for example, something that the community can engage with, sort of serves as a social lubricant to get people talking around that art piece, right? So maybe that as a guiding principle. And then making sure that it reflects a broad set of cultures, so that, we're making sure that, and this maybe fits in the first one of reflects the current needs of our arts and cultural community, but I guess just wanting to make sure that we're talking about a broad representation of our culture there. And then, which can further encourage empathy. And then in terms of Belle Red versus across the city, especially as we talk about it resulting in additional community activities. Are we thinking beyond Belle Red, especially, the more touch points we can have across the city, the more people will reach, I think, and encourage more activities, as well as the social skills, as well as encouraging empathy. So just questions along those. Happy to support it, by the way, today.
So absolutely, we're encouraging artistic activity across our entire community and the East Side. Grant programs are not limited within the city of Bellevue borders. Sometimes our cultural facilities are elsewhere. Currently, there's very little arts and culture activity in our arts district. We have a lot of creative businesses that are there. We have a lot of places that call their home in Belle Red, but there's very little activation. So this is a really pointed way to move activation into Belle Red, which isn't currently there. But we're not at any way, shape, or form leaving our citywide approach to these.
Got it. Thank you. And I actually would like to see more of that activation. I understand prioritizing the arts district, but love to see more of that across the city. And not sure how we might go about including some of the interactivity as part of the guiding principles.
Staff can look into that and get maybe some more details. A lot of the programs themselves are interactive. So I wonder if what we're really looking at is that a metric that we're trying to capture in application or report about what is the level of interactivity, as opposed to like passive presentation of arts.
Yeah, I would love to capture that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zahn, followed by Councilmember Lee, and then myself.
Yes, thank you. I support this as well. So I'm going to start right with that, because I do think that just like Councilmember Barksdale talked about, I think about arts as engagement. It's in a way to connect identity expression, and we have so much local talent right here to showcase in this work. I like the fact that we're going to simplify. There's predictability if we can do multi-year, as well as removing the disparity between the more mature, larger organizations versus the smaller startups that may need more help from us in order to build the community-based organization capacity. So I would want to make sure that as we think about this, it's both helping them with an actual event that they want to host, as well as the ability to actually build up their capacity to provide the events. So making sure that it isn't one or the other, that we have the capacity to do both. And I do remember the last time that only about 50% of the requested funds was able to be provided, and asking the question about so will the event still happen if they only get 50% of the funding, which leads to, I guess, my comment / question, which is that when I was at the Visit Bellevue annual meeting last week, right, we were there, and they were talking about starting a festival and events subcommittee. And I'm wondering if there's a way for us as part of this grant process to also look at matching grants from the business community, or leveraging things like Visit Bellevue, so that we can amplify the amount of funds that we can offer within the $145,000. How do we help them get more presence, be able to to go after this other type of funding? We have, a lot of very caring business community that funds a number of things. It's not as clear to me what the pipeline looks like to connect the business community to these very artists and programs that we fund through the arts. So that would be my question.
So it's an excellent question. So I'm going to try to parse out a couple pieces here. I absolutely agree with you that operational support funding is something that is incredibly vital. That is where we're seeing that difference between our Eastside Art Partnerships and our projects. We're really thinking about those two in different ways, where Eastside Art Partnership could become more of a sustained support, operating support, and our project grants are really for a specific project. As to partnership with Visit Bellevue, I'm really excited to get my feet wet as I join that board, learn more about the organization, find ways to build those bridges and connections. The events and festivals committee that they are working on is fantastic. I know that they are really geared towards very large events. They're really looking at things that will drive maybe several night-long hotel stays. And that's an incredibly important part of our arts and culture environment. These grants often fund the rest of the environment, where it's maybe our smaller organizations that are doing one night, or it's more community-based. Not to say that there's not certainly large events within this grant pool. Wintergrass is a good example. That drives something like $6 million of economic impact, and it's within this grant pool as well. So it's a mix. I hear your feedback to find ways to connect those two pools and see where there might be partnership. And then as for corporate support for these organizations, so like we said, this grant funds 53% of requests. Our arts and culture community is out there doing the good work of sponsorship themselves. So they are out there talking to our business community. That's where they get the rest of the funding. They get it from their members. Sometimes they get it from some earned income of ticket fees, but they are out there building those connections, and we're here to help them build those whenever they need them as well.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful, because I do think that for some of our underserved communities, they're not necessarily going to have the connections to be able to get to the very corporate sponsorship that would be very helpful for them to have. So thank you.
Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I appreciate the presentation. As we know, or as you see, we are very interested in arts and culture and what it can do to our community. As you know, also, the request every year is obviously very underfunded. And so this is, when we first designed it many years ago, you had a certain principles, certain framework in mind, certain implementation scheme, right? Based on what was available, what was the situation, circumstance, what are the priorities. So this is an ongoing thing. So I really feel that this is good, that you are constantly working to make it better and more relevant to the community. And so I want to compliment you for doing this and initiating this. My question is, it is something that you have a lot of good principles. We all agree to it, right? Principle of what we believe. The key is, you haven't done it yet. You are going to be actually coming up with specific things, and that has to be part of the process, right? And so it's a work in progress. So this is a good topic for study session, really. The city council that represents the public, the community, and you, the staff, you have your experience. You've seen what's happening, and what is going on, what may happen, because you are also engaging, part of the community, and especially the part of the arts and culture organizations that are doing it. So you know what the reality is. And we know what the reality is based on what we believe the community is like. And my sense is that a lot of council members' comments are very, very relevant. I can remember so much, some of them I don't. Like Councilmember Zhang's mentioned, it is really something that we need to build capacity. You mentioned that also. Some traditional organizations, they know how to do it. So, but yes, that's fine. We may be given less now, but they're already ongoing. Maybe they don't need to depend on us that much. So we need to seek out other underserved populations, community organizations. How can we help them to even get started? So I think there's always a balance. You don't want to snub somebody, terminate, end their progress by giving the resource to somebody else. No, you want to have everybody to flourish, to survive. And that's where the challenge is. So I think we depend on you. But my sense is that one of the key things to arts and culture, is to have each culture to showcase what they have, because that will bring people together. But I always believe, that's why I'm very excited about cross-culture connection. That means if just having cultures, just do it for themselves, it's good, but it's also good, just like eating food. If you share with other people, you mentioned that young people, when they go together, they bring diversity together. But when you see an adult event, you don't really see diversity together. You go to one culture event, you just see that culture there. Other people don't go. So we need to emphasize what kind of encouragement can we provide, incentive. When you provide grant is a very good tool to bring people together. If we can provide a principle, I would very strongly advocate. I believe the council supports it. We want to make sure the cross-culture community are working together to share the experiences and create the experiences so that all can be together, doing things, sharing our experience, working together, learning about each other. And that's how we can actually be one community. So I hope that you can consider that, maybe include that as part of your grant principle, if you may call it, or I would probably call it a grant condition. I think that is a good thing. But there are others, many council members already talked.
Councilmember Lee, could you please wrap it up?
I will wrap it up. So I believe this is a work in progress. I would definitely support your working on this, because it is on work in progress. But I would like to see what other things we can build in to meet the principle of actually bringing people together, sharing their own culture through their arts, so that they actually know, understand, work together with each other.
Great.
So I would like to have you come back, and maybe we need to have a little more discussion on how we can accomplish those purposes. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe Lori, you can take that back to your conversations. We've heard a lot of good comments tonight. I have a couple of comments I'd like to make. You know, one thing I'd like to make sure that when we have public displays of art, that they are all accessible. I know that in the past we've had bellwether exhibits, or you had to go downstairs to get to them. And I don't know that there's always an elevator that will get you there as well. So I'd like to make sure that all the exhibits that we have in the city are accessible to people of all abilities. The other thing is I'd love to see sustainability as a criteria for a project. I think it'd be really fun to see sustainable art. I know it's out there, and I think that would be really cool for our city. I'm also curious about the budget. I mean, $35,000 a year to a very, a growing city seems pretty small. If you could tell me, I know this is not a budget discussion tonight, I get that, but if you could give me an idea of where we are compared to other cities, it might inform us when we do have our budget discussions.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Bellevue is mid to low on our funding if you look per capita. So some of the cities around us, Seattle funds about $5.34 in arts grants per capita. Issaquah funds $3.74 per capita. Bellevue funds 94 cents per capita. And Renton is funding 51 cents, and Redmond is at funding 19 cents. So those are all just arts grants per capita.
Okay, well, that gives us a good idea of where we are compared to the other cities in the region. So I won't go any further with that, but I love art. And I think that, all of us really appreciated the impact that art had on our souls during COVID. And it has that impact all the time. It's just, you don't always appreciate it because either you're not around it or you're not open to it. So I really appreciate the work that you and everybody does to bring arts to everybody in our city and give people the opportunity to grow through the arts. And I like Councilmember Lee's comments about cross-cultural arts learning. That sounds really valuable. So I think that's it. Is there a motion to direct staff?
There is, Mayor. I move to direct staff to initiate work on updates to the Bellevue Arts Grants Guidelines to better support arts and culture nonprofits and making Bellevue a more vibrant community consistent with Economic Development Plan and Bellevue City Council 2021-2023 vision and priorities.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. So it's 7:41. We're going to take a 10-minute break and resume at 7:51 for our last study session item. Is it? Yeah, it's our last study session item. Mr. Miyake, go ahead.
Sure, Mayor and council members, as the mayor mentioned, this is the last study session item on your agenda this evening, and it's an informational update on the development of the Parks and Open Space System Plan. And just by way of background, the Parks and Open Space System Plan is a primary tool used to guide the long-term growth and development of Bellevue's parks and open space system. The plan is updated every 6 years, and the current plan was adopted by council in 2016. So it's right on time that we are in the process of updating the plan. And so although no formal action of the council is being requested this evening, staff are seeking council feedback to finalize the plan and return at a later date for council to adopt. So joining us this evening is Mayako Shiosaki, the Director of the Parks and Community Services, as well as Ryan Walker, Senior Planner, also from the Department of Parks and Community Services. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, City Manager Miyake. And good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and City Council members. Tonight, we will present an overview of the update to the Parks and Open Space System Plan. We provided a bit of a preview of this work at your March 7th Council budget meeting as a part of the Parks Long-Term Funding Strategy agenda item. The Parks and Open Space System Plan is a 20-year plan, and the plan is updated every 6 years. Robust public engagement is a part of the plan update, and you'll hear more about the specifics of that engagement in a few moments. From the public engagement, here's a taste of what we heard. And it's likely no surprise in our growing city, there are significant needs in parks, open space, and the recreation system as identified by the community. This includes the need, includes meeting the needs of what we call emerging sports like cricket and pickleball, and gaps in the parks and open space system in terms of parks and neighborhoods, including Eastgate and Factoria and Bellred, and meeting the needs for open space in fast-growing areas such as downtown, Wilburton, and Bellred. And lastly, consistent feedback over many park system plan updates, and that's to continue to create trails and trail linkages and preserve more open space. So next slide, please. As you heard, the presentation is for information only, although we are available for your feedback on the plan. We hope to finalize the plan and return with a proposed resolution to adopt the plan at a future meeting later this spring. I will now hand off the presentation to our senior planner, Ryan Walker. Ryan.
Great. Thank you, Director Shiosaki, and greetings, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Really glad to be with you this evening. And this presentation will consist of a brief overview on why we plan, a summary of the public input, details on plan content, and finally the next plan or the next steps to expect. First, just a little bit of timeline on the milestones so far. So we kicked the plan off last summer. After initial scoping and system research, there was a public input period lasting about 4 months in total, which also overlapped with the Parks and Community Services Board review. Then in February, the Parks and Community Services Board recommended the draft plan forward to council for approval through a unanimous vote. And I just want to thank Councilmember Zahn and Councilmember Stokes, who served as Parks and Community Services Board liaisons during the board review. And of course, now we are in council review and are looking forward to adoption in the late spring time period. So just wanted to give you a brief, little brief on why we complete a parks and open space system plan. Really, the system plan is the primary long-range guidance for parks and open space facilities. It's required for National Recreation and Parks Association accreditation, as well as some grants. And the plan identifies the needs of the system for the future. As Director Shiosaki mentioned, the plan horizon is for 20 years, with an update occurring about every 6 years. And we are currently conducting an update. And really the intent of the update is to ensure that the plan is consistent with policy, such as the comprehensive plan, as well as recently adopted policy and initiatives throughout the city. Additionally, we use community input as well as data and recreation trends to evaluate what objectives remain appropriate from the prior plan and what may need to be added. Therefore, many objectives remain from the prior plan and in effect. So ultimately, the Parks and Open Space System Plan contains the big ideas, which will then have their own planning processes in the future to implement those recommendations. So community input is a vital part of the process, and I'll provide a little bit further detail on what we found. But first, just a little bit on the methodology that we collected community input. So it was multi-pronged and conducted largely between September 2021 and January 2022. There were 2 surveys conducted. One was a statistically valid random sample, and that was completed by nearly 500 respondents. The other survey was open to any community member and completed by over 400 respondents. There was also a public meeting held in September to accept community feedback. And there are many public meetings held, including a neighborhood leadership gathering, as well as presentations for city boards and commissions, including 6 meetings with the Parks and Community Services Board. There was also outreach to community organizations to spread the word about the survey and other ways to participate, as well as hear from their staff and their clients. And finally, should mention the outreach was largely organized through digital means, especially in this COVID environment. So the Engaging Bellevue website served as a hub for outreach to share the survey, post critical dates, as well as other information. And there was over 140 ideas shared on the site. And plan outreach was also sent through many social media sites and city listservs. So ultimately, needs were identified in this update based on what we heard through the community input. And some of those common themes, considering all of the input received, really emerged. So just quickly going through those, we see that we heard that parks are really important to quality of life, which is great to hear, and that the parks are well maintained. There is an interest in protecting natural resources and open space throughout the city, particularly as growth continues. There's a desire to expand local trail connections, both to greenway corridors, as well as the parks themselves. Parks are needed in neighborhoods lacking in parks, as well as those expected to grow rapidly. We heard that we should consider a variety of facilities, including emerging sports, as Director Shiosaki mentioned, such as pickleball and cricket. There's interest in design for interaction and gathering through innovation in our park system. There is interest in providing relevant facilities for a diverse population, including those with disabilities, as well as all ages and ethnicities. And finally, interest in preserving history and cultural resources. In looking a little bit closer at the survey data, over the next 3 slides, I'll offer a little bit of specifics related, and this is the statistically valid survey data. So shown on this slide, there was a question asked of which facilities were used by any household in the prior 12 months. And you see generally the results are consistent with prior plan data where trails, community beaches, open areas for unstructured play, display gardens ranked very highly. And this has been consistent through other plans as well as other surveys within the city. Similarly, in another question, respondents were asked of priorities that they wish to be the focus moving forward. And this is using the same options as the use data. And priorities were generally similar to those use statistics. And again, are very consistent with prior plans and surveys. And on the right-hand side, the word cloud depicts some of the open-ended responses, indicating more specific priorities we heard from the survey. And finally, I wanted to touch on system access. So respondents were asked whether they perceive that they are within walking distance to a park or trail access point. And if so, whether they can access that point safely. And as you see, the numbers were pretty high, with 87% indicating they were within 10 minutes and 95% stating they can reach the park or trail safely. At the same time, we do know there are some gaps in access, and I'll touch on a few of those momentarily, but this is generally good news for our system. I'll now shift to the contents of the plan and some of the key updates. So the table below indicates the plan organization and some of the changes as part of this update. Some elements I'll touch a bit on more specifically, but a couple of initial notes. Excuse me. All chapters are basically updated with the latest information and statistics. In the policy framework chapter, the environmental stewardship plan and the diversity advantage initiative were the primary additions there. Also, there was text throughout the plan added or edited to represent needs related to equitable access for a diverse population. and bring our language into 2022. And the capital project objectives really form the primary recommendations of the plan, and I'll get into those in a couple of slides. First, just a quick look at some of the recently completed projects since the last plan update. And this selection includes acquisition in various areas of the city, a completion of Maidenbower Bay Park Phase 1, as well as Surrey Downs Park, improvements to Downtown Park, including the Inspiration Playground and the Circle, improvements to sport fields, mostly synthetic fields, completion of the aquatic feasibility study, and park planning for Newport Hills Woodlawn Park, which is now under construction, as well as Bridle Trails Neighborhood Park. And looking now at level of service, so assessing the parks and open space system level of service is a component of the plan, forming the basis for capital project objectives. So level of service is really rooted in data. So new to this plan, we use spatial data to assess neighborhood characteristics and further consider the populations being impacted by gaps in service. So the three measures you see listed are consistent with national best practices. Individual participation and public satisfaction are based upon survey data. And walkable access is really based on spatial data. And you see representation of that in the map on the right. And I'll note that increasing walkable access is also a goal of the 2020 Environmental Stewardship Plan. And you can see some of the gaps in access in neighborhoods such as Belred, Crossroads, Eastgate, and Factoria, amongst other smaller areas, which really feeds into our capital project objectives work. So moving from level of service into focus areas, the plan consists of 7 focus areas as listed, and these have been used in the last several plans to organize our needs and gaps within the park system. So the map on the right shows the dispersed objectives throughout the city, and this was included in the council packet. And I'll go through each focus area briefly to identify the core objectives and the proposed additions and edits with this plan. So first, starting off with open space, greenways, wildlife corridors, and trails. The core objectives are to really focus on greenways establishment, connection to greenways in the parks, along with natural resource conservation. Proposed additions with this update include utilizing using underutilized spaces, such as street ends and rights of way, to add and provide access to parks and trails. Objectives are also proposed to be added based on community feedback to represent broader goals for open space and natural areas conservation and stewardship. Under the parks facilities focus area, the core objectives are adding neighborhood parks, particularly in neighborhoods where there are gaps such as Eastgate. These objectives remain, as well as continued development of community parks from the prior plan update in 2016. With this update, it is proposed that the continued phase development of Eastgate Park be added, and that potential acquisition of community parks is added to represent that potential for all community parks within the system. For active recreation facilities, at its core, the objective here is really to provide a diversity of facilities, from community centers to sport fields and courts to specific facilities such as golf courses. So proposed are enhancement of pickleball and cricket facilities. There are also specifics added regarding off-leash dog areas development, including a facility serving downtown, completion of the off-leash area at Newport Hills Woodlawn Park, currently under construction, and development of other geographically dispersed facilities in the city. It's also proposed that a new aquatic facility be listed under active recreation rather than just under the partnership's focus area where it is in the current plan. Moving on to urban park systems, this focus area really conveys objectives related to acquisition, development, and stewardship of parks and open space in the most urban neighborhoods or those planned for urban growth. So this includes Bel-Red, downtown, and Eastgate along the I-90 corridor. For this update, it's proposed that Wilburton is added because of the future growth potential and critical forthcoming connections along East Trail. Waterfront access focus area has an objective to acquire and develop public waterfront, and several sites are identified in the current plan for development or enhancement and proposed to remain. Proposed for addition is a general objective for non-motorized launch and storage areas, as well as long-term consideration of access to Lake Bellevue. And this is particularly true with its proximity to the East Trail corridor. The partnership opportunities focus area contains objectives to partner with public, private, and nonprofit entities on park creation and enhancement. And additionally, there remains interest in connecting to regional facilities as well outside of the Bellevue system. So with this update, it's proposed that an objective is added to partner with conservation organizations such as Land Trust toward open space conservation goals. The narrative has also been added or updated with a more inclusive list of regional partners, and also updated with the potential for additional cross-country, cross-cultural programming or other needs. And finally, the historic, cultural, and art resources focus area emphasizes protection and interpretation of history and culture, as well as provision of space for artistic expression. So the narrative is proposed to reflect new opportunities here, particularly along the East Trail corridor. So finally, I'll leave you with anticipated next steps, and these include finalizing the layout and graphics, a SEPA review process, a council adopting a resolution, which would be forthcoming later this spring. And following that, we would submit the plan to the State Recreation and Conservation Office in order for the city to be eligible for grants this year. And that is a summary of the Parks and Open Space Plan update, and we are glad to take any feedback or questions and would incorporate that into the document and come back later this spring with an adopting resolution for you. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for a great presentation. You know, I'm going to start off with Councilmember Zahn because she was the liaison to the Parks Board for so long, and we'll follow with Councilmember Stokes, and then I see Deputy Mayor has his hand up. So let's start with Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. You know, I really want to express my appreciation for the hard work of the staff and the Parks Board in really getting us to this point. Ryan, this is accumulation of a lot of work and effort with you and Shelley and the staff to do the outreach with the community and come up with some really good recommendations of additions to the plan. I thought that the Parks Board had some really robust conversation about what should be in the plan, if something was currently in the plan, why it was in the plan. And so I really appreciate all those efforts. I would just like to highlight that I thought it was important that we continue to be grounded in the fact that this is about inclusive access for all abilities and communities, and about activating spaces, engaging and connecting. I personally appreciated adding the piece about leveraging street ends or right-of-ways for some of the neighborhoods like mine that have no parks within a walkable distance. So getting that added was important. And I would say that and especially down in South Bellevue, where, as you said, in Eastgate and Factoria, we really don't have very many parks or open space for people to connect and engage that is not a shopping mall. So I appreciate that. I will say that the one that was not in the list of additions that you did bring up in our presentation today was about the cross-cultural programming and other needs, because one of the things we did talk about is whether things like a cross-cultural center or additional community center spaces is part of this Parks and Open Space plan. Because I believe it's more than just the cross-cultural programming and other needs. It's the potential for additional physical facility and space to be able to have those connections. So I believe it's in there. I just wanted to highlight the fact that in the additions part of our packet, it was not specifically listed. But Ryan, I believe it is in the very long 143-page draft.
That is correct. It is in there, and we're describing it as programming and other resources potentially at the moment, awaiting the final feasibility that I think is forthcoming in the next month or two. So we can certainly make sure that the final plan language reflects what's in that feasibility. But we have updated the plan to reflect the 2020 feasibility for the cross-cultural facility, and reflecting that relationship with the Parks Department.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Just like when the mayor was asking about the dollars per capita for arts funding. When I think about the per capita community space, we might find that we don't have sufficient space for the population and the community, the growing community that we have. So thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes, followed by Deputy Mayor. Is he here? I don't see his.
I do no longer see
Okay,
Councilmember Stokes. We may have lost him.
Why don't we go on to you, Deputy Mayor, and we'll ask Charmaine, our city clerk, to contact Councilmember Stokes and see if he can get him back on the line. And he returns.
Sounds good. Michael, Ryan, thanks for the great presentation tonight. This plan is shaping up nicely, and I think our reputation as that city in a park looks on a good path. A couple of quick questions for you. So, off-leash areas, growing concern or of interest of our residents. And personally, I've heard a lot of residents downtown as our fastest growing neighborhood that we really need an off-leash area downtown. So can you dive into this a little bit more into that approach, and not only in terms of getting the off-leash area in downtown, but also how we're going to, in an equitable way, distribute different off-leash areas throughout the city?
Absolutely, Anna. That's a great question. So the prior plan was fairly broad in its representation of off-leash areas. And we still do refer to the 2010 feasibility study, but this plan, we've expanded upon the specifics a bit. And that's both from community input as well as talking and looking at the feasibility. So there's 4 independent specific bullets under the off-leash areas I would point to. One is the current Robbinswood facility, some plans to update that. The second bullet would be a off-leash area serving downtown. The third would be completing the Newport Hills Woodlawn Park facility that's currently under construction. And then the fourth is looking at dispersed sites across the city. And so that's the most long range, I would say, of the 4. Okay. But the idea would be, to your point, look at where those gaps may be, look at the facilities that might be the most ideal. And there may be some touch-ups from that 2010 plan that we would need to consider there.
Okay.
Or feasibility, I should say, not. Yeah.
Gotcha. And thank you for inserting in the presentation about which I feel should be probably our #1 acquisition target, is to find park space for the residents in the Eastgate Factoria area. I think that's paramount. On slide 12, you said, just looking for a little bit of context, but you said residents felt safe accessing a trail or a park. I think it was up to like 90, but was that safe walking, biking, or just driving, or was it just kind of open-ended? Do you just feel safe going to a park? I'm not sure, but I don't know if you can put that into a further context. And then I'll ask my last question here that you can answer as well. And that, as you probably know, Governor Inslee signed Senate Bill 5615, making pickleball our official sport for Washington State. So you touched on it there briefly, but the same kind of question in terms of what we're talking about, the off-leash areas there. Can you dive just a little bit deeper into the current facilities that we have for pickleball, and again, how we're going to equitably distribute different pickleball sport courts around the city?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll tackle the access question first. Okay. So that question is really referring to walking. It refers specifically to walking access. Okay. I think some people are probably looking at it, biking as well.
All right.
But it's oriented around access, not necessarily safety in the park facility itself. So,
okay.
Going to how wide sidewalks are, do we have good crossings, those sorts of things.
Okay, that's good.
And then on the pickleball front, I would say there's short and long-term strategies, as mentioned in the plan. Briefly, it's the current status of pickleball is there's some independent, just dedicated pickleball courts around the city. There are some that are striped for pickleball, but also tennis. And then there are other providers that provide a more group setup for pickleball. And so I would say on the short term, there's interest in looking at how we might have shared court use and expand that in areas that don't have as many courts available. And that's mostly outdoor, but also applies to indoor community centers and drop-in times that are available. And then long-term, potentially looking for a cluster option. And that could be in the city directly. It could be a regional approach, looking at how we provide more of those kind of facilities specifically for tournaments and for groups. I know the pickleball folks would really emphasize how much it brings out community and having everyone together in those spaces. So that's, we heard a lot about that.
Indeed. Fantastic. Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for asking about pickleball. I appreciate that. I had a couple of questions. Two things that I didn't see in this, and maybe I just missed it, are a long time ago when I was on the Parks Board with Councilmember Stokes, we talked about urban pathways through downtown Bellevue. And I know we have a few of them, but they are not interconnected. And I wonder if with all the development going on downtown, if there's any plan to connect all those urban pathways together so that you can transverse downtown through beautiful properties. And then I guess I'll ask my second question. You can answer them both. As somebody who rides her bike quite a bit, a big hole in the system is between Kelsey Creek and Crossroads. And it's just, there's really no great way to get from Kelsey Creek area to Crossroads. You can get from downtown to Kelsey Creek, but then, you got to zigzag around. And I know that there are some properties that the city owns throughout there, and there are some that maybe could become public access. I wonder if there's ever been an effort to try to create an inter-neighborhood route for peds and bikes that would go from Kelsey Creek all the way up to Crossroads area.
Sure. So I'll talk a little bit about downtown pathways. Really, the plan focuses on the greenways, so the lake to lake in particular, and then how that's connected through the southern portion of the downtown corridor, as well as the Grand Connection. And so I would say the Grand Connection, it was in the plan in 2016, but has been updated certainly since then. So those are identified, as well as just urban pathways generally from Maidenbower connecting into downtown. and then broadly expanding the wide sidewalks, pedestrian corridors in downtown. So a lot of those elements were in the 2016 plan in brief and have been updated to reflect sort of current priorities and needs.
I'll just say
So I
that,
hope-
it was an amenity for many developers to put in little pathways through their properties. And so even by El Gaucho, that building has a beautiful, you go up these little stairs and go through a rock garden and you pop out, a block later. And there are some of those in Bellevue that people don't even know about. And it would be great to map them and make them more easily accessible and somehow connect them. Obviously you have to go across the street, but it'd be fun to know, how you could walk around town using those.
Integrating with the development plans. Generally, we added a bit of text there, but I think that's a really good point and should make sure that we're covering what we need to in that section.
And that might be a piece that we need to coordinate with community development on. I think a lot of what you see in the Parks and Open Space System Plan is either in street right of way or other public parkland. So probably a little less of, easements across private property and some of those things. But you raise a good point about how people want to actually experience the city, and it isn't just along public rights of way.
And then in corridor from Kelsey to Crossroads, that's not specifically called out in the plan. Typically, it's a pretty broad approach as far as expanding connections in the park plan. And a lot of it is based on working with transportation, working within the transportation, the ped and bike initiatives currently ongoing to make sure we have those routes established. So I think anytime parks can be used to expand those routes, I think that's something that we look for.
Because I think a lot of those forested, uplands above Kelsey Creek are so steep that, they're more of hiking trails or pedestrian trails and probably not very suitable for bicycles just because of how steep those slopes are there. So it is a bit hard to kind of get up the hill, I'll put it that way.
There is, but right next to you, you have a very flattish golf course. And I'm just looking for, any way to put in accessible routes for cyclists. And I know that we have a parkland kind of behind Silver Glen and Highland Middle School. And, that's an underused piece of property. So I'm just hoping that part of the plan can be to look at all the opportunities that we might have. I see Councilmember Stokes is back, so let's go to you.
Okay, there is a fact that you actually have to have your computer plugged in so to go this long. So anyhow, glad I got back. It's really exciting to see the plan coming forward, and I appreciate your having Councilmember Zahn first on this, because I'm just, although, you and I were on the Parks Board back in 2008 to 11, but it's good to hear what's coming up now. The fascinating thing about this, and I think this is a compliment to the Parks Department, the Community Development Department, is that we're talking about things that have been put in place or groundwork for this going way back. And that's something the Bellevue's park system has a very consistent plan and working together. And one of the things that I learned early on was that, the Parks Board and the Parks Department are very patient, and eventually we get someplace, sometimes quicker than others. But it is that planning and persistence and working hard on it. And I think that's exemplified by this park plan today. And I heard a little bit of the comments, and I appreciate those that have been made. What I'm interested in to comment on your the thing you brought up, Mayor. I think that is very important. There are a lot of things of connections we're having now that we've talked about for a long time. One of them is is the Grand Connection itself. And we brought it up from just coming up from the Bay to downtown Park, and now all the way over to, and eventually you'll be able to go all the way across up Bellevue, up to the other, north or east side of it. And the other is the East Rail, which is not specifically a part of, it's connected with the parks piece going on that, and having that whole piece going forward and where it goes is amazing. And then, you have these trails that if you go into the Botanical Gardens, you go on past the swinging bridge and down in there, then you come up into the to the new school there, and it's kind of hitting into what you were talking about earlier. So we've done a lot to connect that, and I appreciate that. One of the things I just wanted to in this particular session is just listen to what other people are talking about, because we have a lot of work to do, and it's and this council is very innovative, and parks has always been a huge asset of the city. So I'm very excited about it, and I think that we have a lot of work to do on it, but it's well laid out, and I'm just looking forward to actually putting this in place and working through it, and making this an iterative process as we go along. And certainly, as council members work on this and have ideas, I know the Parks Board would be very interested in that, and the department. But again, I'm just excited to be involved in this, and I think we're going to come up with a fantastic, even more fantastic park system. And congratulations for the work and the presentation. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from council? Not seeing any. Is there a motion, Deputy Mayor?
I don't believe this is just information only tonight, so I don't believe there is a motion.
Nobody called me.
I just saw your hand go up
we're
just
taking
a
turns.
second, Councilmember Lee. You just put your hand up the second, so I just saw it.
Oh,
as
I thought you were hearing from
talking to
everyone.
Deputy Mayor. So we'll go ahead. There's time for you.
I hope so. Yeah, we are having a couple of real heavy duty issues tonight. I'm very, it all is about people. I really appreciate the mayor's question, earlier, and there was a real healthy conversation going back and forth. And this is what the study session is about, is to allow us to have dialogue, exchange between each of us, and listen to all of us talking. And then the staff having back and forth, so we can develop, ideas and thoughts that need to be followed up. So this is good. And to me, Bellevue is Bellevue because it's people, that's ultimately who come to Bellevue to live. We are sitting in the park because we pay attention to system of connecting people together. And earlier we talked about arts and culture, the same thing. We're connecting people together. We're finding common themes that we all enjoy. People meeting physically and culturally together. And I think that's important. So it needs, and you just have done a great job, because it is very complicated, very complex. Anything involves people, and people are always changing. We're growing. The community at one time, the population is a lot smaller when I first came here, and the diversity is almost non-existent. So we always have diversity, but now it's a lot more complicated. So I think this is an ongoing process. And this is a 20-year plan, don't forget. It takes 6 years, you say on the average to update it. So it's a big deal. We can't, it requires, and we have the document you prepared. I don't know how much time you took, but it must have taken a lot of deliberation and time preparation. But we got it. We read it. We see one perspective. We need to talk about it, right? So I really appreciate. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking. I know the mayor is always very conscientious about timing. So I cannot talk to you for whatever it needs. because I believe it's very important. So we need to spend time on it. You have the survey, very good. You've come up with some ideas. One of the things that I appreciate Councilmember Janice Zhang mentioned, cross-culture things. That's just one idea. But the basis for that is, again, bring people together. So, the question to all this is when we talk to people and people respond, your survey you mentioned, we talk about cricket, we talk about Quetta Center, we talk about a number of things. Sometimes people, if they don't have their mind on the subject they're looking at, or if we're not talking to the people in the right way, we're not going to get the result in our cross-culture. In our survey. One of the things that pointed out to me, I should not be even saying that because I believe what we do should be common to all people, so that all people can be doing things together. But sometimes we have to talk about separate things because in order to have people share in common, you got to have ability to provide what you have that you're proud of, but it's got to be shared and connected. One of the things that didn't get mentioned, I believe, I'm surprised in this area, the Asian American, Chinese Americans, one of the biggest minority population. And I don't see your survey mentioning about ping pong, badminton. Even if you ask the population group, I guarantee you're going to have lots of folks that we need to have a place where we can play ping pong.
Michael, do you want to respond to that?
Please, if you allow the conversation, please do it.
But I hope we're meeting some of that need. And I know there are some very active groups that do ping pong at Crossroads and other facilities. So I think maybe we're helping meet that current need. I don't know, Ryan, if you'd heard anything else on ping pong as part of the survey?
Not specifically, but I think the community centers, that would be probably where they reside, and the recreation program plan will be moving forward. So we may hear more there.
I would like to get some data. You talk about data and trends. So let's do it. Let's get some data. Let's get some trends. And we represent the community. We know the community. And I'm raising the question. Doesn't mean I'm right. No, it doesn't. But it needs to be a conversation and dialogue and discussion. Another thing I know we've been talking about for years, some people have talked to me about a squash court. Squash is a big deal to some people, right? We don't have a squash court. Now I'm glad somebody brought up pickleball. That's great. So what do we include? How do we talk about this? So my point is that we need to discuss all these. And then I personally believe that cross-culture is really the principle. And all these others are part and parcel of it. Bring them together, get people together, however we need to do it. So let's not forget one and do it at the expense of another one. That doesn't make sense. You win one, lose one. You're net zero. Sometimes that doesn't make sense. Let's do it in the bigger picture. So, I like, it's important what you're doing, absolutely. But I just feel that we need to have conversation, discussion. Reading your report, Janice mentioned, 140 pages. There's a lot of ideas will come across when somebody reads it, when I read it. And each council member have their own ideas. So let's talk. And you don't know what we think unless we talk. And let's give every one of us the opportunity, especially council members, the opportunity to talk, have a dialogue. Then we can come up. Then if we have questions, we talk to the community. And we should have, together, we should all be conversing. So let's not do it in a big hurries. We're going to do it. No, let's do it right. Do it fully, do it completely, so we don't miss anyone. Another thing I didn't mention it, badminton. There's another one. This is big.
Hey, Councilmember Lee.
Badminton. So I'm not going to need your answers. I'm just bringing it out to you. So let's continue, have a conversation. I would love to be talking to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, not seeing any. Oh, okay, Councilmember Stokes, do you have your own unique comment and question that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I just want to I think that's absolutely what Councilmember Lee said is important. I think we're doing that. So we could have a conversation maybe at the retreat. We could talk a little bit about this because it just raises issues that are interesting in terms of how do we function and what how do we are we duplicating things and all that. So the theme keeps coming up. So I would like to have some conversation about it. This isn't the place to do that.
Okay, city manager, note that please for our retreat. And we can talk to you offline about more specifics. Oh,
okay.
Oh, there you are. Okay, you jumped on my screen for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that was a good conversation. I hope staff that you got the feedback that you will find valuable as you proceed on this. And we thank you all for the work that you're doing and that you continue to do. This is a big process, but it's exciting just the same. So with that, there are no other things. I want to remind everybody that next week's Monday's meeting is canceled because we will be on retreat at the end of this week through the weekend. And so we will not be having a meeting this Monday, but the following Monday, we will be back for our next council meeting. So our meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.